Hello everyone and welcome to Sinful Gaming. I hope you're all doing well, I hope you're all staying safe, and most of all, I hope you're all fighting that war against the grey. Today, we're going to talk about an interesting topic, I think. This, I guess, is maybe not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but it's an interesting topic based on some things I've seen happen in Facebook groups, on Twitter, in my local game store, and a whole bunch of other places as well. This just happens in the hobby in general, I find. So, today I want to talk about why the meta doesn't matter. And we're going to go through what I mean by the meta and why I think it doesn't matter most of the time. So, let's start with what is the meta? So, the meta, what is it? The meta, I guess, is the likelihood of amount of armies you're going to see. I guess it's the armies that you're commonly going to see in games, normally at tournaments. I will stress that normally the meta is going to refer to a competitive setting. Now, you may hear the term local meta as well. This might mean the armies that are in your local area's meta. So this can be vastly different from tournaments. We'll get talking about that more later, but that is what the meta is. It's the armies and I guess the composition of armies that make up your gaming scene wherever or whatever you are playing. So now that we've talked about, I guess, given a description of what we think the meta is, let's talk about the internet meta. So the internet meta in general, I think, is the more likened to the competitive meta. We see tournaments posted and we see results posted and people start talking about how an army has won a tournament, whether that be a common thing or an uncommon thing. It sort of gets people chatting. And this sort of turns into a meta of itself where the internet focuses on what armies are doing well in tournaments consistently and what armies are not. And this isn't a bad thing in any way at all. I rather quite enjoy seeing what armies win at tournaments and what don't myself. And there's some great resources there as well. Things like the Honest Wargamer is a fantastic resource for a competitive meta. You've got guys like AOS Coach who do great shows talking about competitive meta armies. You've got other things like Listbot, which helps you build sort of meta-based lists and gives you ideas for confronting the meta, and a whole host of other things. There's some really great tools out there. Warhammer Community as well puts out its Meta Watch articles as well. Now, worldwide statistics and all of this, they are great and they are invaluable knowledge to have with the game of Warhammer Age of Sigmar, or any game really. I mean, I start looking at a different sort of thing. Let's talk about football, and I do very similar things where I look at statistics and numbers and all that sort of things, talking about, oh, this player looks like he might be a great signing for the club I support, because all these things add up to, well, him being good in the meta. We need an attacking player, so he is a good attacking player in the meta. I think he'll fit well in our meta. Anyway, going back on topic, these things are good and they're reliable as well, because generally when we see lots of tournaments and you can see lots of things and an army consistently doing well with the same units, just consistently doing well with players of varying different qualities of skill, this is invaluable data once again. But these statistics are not all. I will stress that a very small portion of games are competitive games. Now, competitive games are generally played at the highest level, especially when you start talking about top table events at major big tournaments. Things like Adepticon, Las Vegas Open, CanCon, etc. All these tournaments are really big. They have lots of players competing at them, and those top table results should definitely be taken with note, because there are some quality players playing with good armies up there. But that meta there is a very, very small minority of players. Much more gaming happens in people's basements, in people's games rooms, their garages, at local game stores between mates. So that is important to remember when looking at the meta, that is at that top pinnacle level, and that isn't the be-all and end-all for armies. Now, like I've said, knowing all this is good, and it is important to realise though that this competitive play section of the game is not the whole game. In fact, it is not even a probably substantial part of it. I would argue much more casual match play is probably the most predominant form of the game. Now, I do like to think that matched and competitive are two very different formats of the game. So I guess with this, you can sort of just get looking at like how this can maybe sort of sway how people talk. Because if people are talking about these competitive armies all the time, and they do get a lot of attention, tournaments get a lot of attention because it's a big, fantastic thing, and that's fine. But when you get people talking about them a lot, it sort of just drives this continuous story about, oh, A army is broken, B army is absolutely terrible, and you've got to maybe look at it, I guess, in a different way, especially for newer players coming in, that not everyone is wanting to get into that competitive meta when you're looking at it. Now, there's, I guess, a rule here that a lot of people talk about, and we'll talk about that now. That rule is the rule of cool. You might hear people pop up with this a lot, and I guess it's sort of maybe wrongly used as a counter argument to a unit is great, but pick the thing you like the most because rule of cool. I think both things have value in being said. And I think that's the point where maybe people get mixed, that you can have both points of view and you can give both points of information. But I will say, from a general point, I do think most people buy the models they like, and they will try to make said models work to the best of their ability. You might be given absolute trash of units, but they may be your favourite ones. But maybe you can make something out of that pile of not too great models and build them up to be something better than some of the parts, or in fact learn those units inside and out to make you a better player with those models, to then maybe bring up your level of play. I can sort of talk about this in my own experiences. I really like Scourge Privateers. This should be no secret for anyone on the channel, but I took that army, and they were not the greatest bunch of models, but I got better with that army, and I was competing with, at the time, quite high tier competitive armies. Some really good ones, and some really good solid players I've played against as well with this, and beaten them with my Scourge Privateers back when I was playing them on a very consistent basis. So the rule of cool can apply. I took something I liked a lot of. I liked the aesthetic. The models were okay. They weren't bad, although maybe the Charybdis was bad. I'll admit that. But I took these models because of the rule of cool, and I made them better by learning how to play with them. And this is, I guess, a piece of information that maybe people can look to when they're sort of seeing new people go, I've bought X unit because I really like the models. Let's take Darkling Covens, for example, and look at Executioners. We know all the problems that we've had with Executioners. They're not as good as Greatswords comparatively next to them. But what you can do, that a new person goes, I really like Executioners, how can I win with Executioners? And maybe the rule of cool here is, cool, they want to play with that, so let's help them be as good with Executioners as they can be. Because this is the thing they want to do, and it's a rule of cool. Like, you can play competitively with that rule of cool. So with that though, now I want to get into the main point of my talk here. I guess this has maybe been a little bit of a sort of a ramble, sort of talking about how I view the game in ways. Now, your local meta is not the internet meta, and I think this is a major point. I talked about your local meta in a brief instance before, but your local meta is what should drive your gaming. Now, you might just be playing with your 3 friends, you get together every other weekend and you play a 4-player game at one of your houses. That is your meta, and that is what you need to be prepared for. So you got one friend who plays Beast of Chaos, another plays Sylvaneth, you're playing Nighthaunt, all 3 of which are comparatively weaker armies, and maybe one of your friends has Kharadron Overlords. Now, I've seen this a lot, and this, for me, was a lot of my early days of wargaming before I started expanding into a wider community of players. But what I did in this time is we would have an arms race amongst ourselves. And we wouldn't necessarily pick the most competitive units, but we'd be trying to bring new things and counter new things. And this brings up interesting units that may not be great in the overall internet meta, but are great in your local meta. For example, let's look at Cities of Sigmar. Say I'm playing a Living City army, and I've got lots of Eternal Guard, but all of a sudden my opponent starts bringing monsters with this high Ren that starts smashing through my lines. All of a sudden, Wildwood Rangers, while not the greatest unit in the game in general, or at least, I guess, talking about the internet meta, let's call it, they might become really good in my local meta because all my friends are taking monsters now. But Wildwood Rangers kill monsters pretty good when they become damage too. And all of a sudden these Wildwood Rangers now start becoming the top unit on the tables, despite the internet saying they're not great. They win games for me. And then my opponents go, oh, well, he's killing all my monsters, so maybe monsters disappear from our tables for a bit. And all of a sudden, my Wildwood Rangers maybe disappear from my list because they're getting killed by sort of basic infantry because I don't have a very good save. And all of a sudden, they're dying to small blocks of liberators with a couple of grand hammers in there, and they're just getting wiped off the table. And so that again changes the meta of like, oh, maybe we need some high rend now to get rid of these liberators. Just see where I'm going with this. And like, your local meta is so important to the games you play because it's going to change what the internet meta is. It's going to change your meta and the meta, how you should view it, because everything in this is changing based on how you're playing your games. And I think that's important to remember. That is my point at the end of this. The point I want to make is Age of Sigmar is your game, not the internet's. And while you'll have plenty of people, my YouTube channel is all about giving people information for Age of Sigmar, it's worth taking into account on how different everyone plays Age of Sigmar and views Age of Sigmar, that you want to and how different, I guess, their games are of Age of Sigmar, even in a competitive setting, or a narrative setting, an open play setting, or just a casual sort of throw models on the table setting, even more casual than open play. It's important to remember that everyone's opinion is valid because that's how they play their games. But it's always important to remember how other people play their games as well, and to think about that other person, to maybe not call the models they've just bought trash because you don't have them working in your meta, but go, oh, well, they might do this. And you can be appropriate when you're giving this information of like, hey, I've not had much luck with them because they just keep getting shot off the table for me. And you go, oh, well, maybe that's not a big issue for me because I don't have to play against a Kharadron Overlords player or a Lumineth player at all. I don't have shooting armies in my local area. None of us play shooting because we don't like it, etc. But on the same point, these people, when you ask for information, I think it's important that you ask for information, but give your outlook on the game as well. This goes two ways. Competitive players need to make sure they're giving the information to the player asking for information that can be useful to them in their setting. But also, I would suggest anyone who's asking for information, make sure you ask for what you want. Don't just go, is this a good list? And nothing else. Because then you're going to get someone going, no, it's a terrible list. None of those units are good in the current meta. And if you've not said anything, that's sort of your fault. If maybe your feelings get hurt because you've been told the list you've just painted up is terrible. But if you go, this is a list and I'm playing against BC Chaos, which, sorry for picking on BC Chaos, I love the army, but they're not currently in the best situation at the moment, I guess, in the internet's meta. And people might go, oh yeah, executioners would do great against them because you just wipe out units of Bestigor and Gore, easy. You'll be fine. And so it's important for both parties to understand the other, that we are playing the same game, and the meta that the internet creates isn't always the most important thing in the world, but it's important to also make sure you're asking for what you're asking. Anyway, that's my point. I just wanted to talk about it. I think it's an interesting subject to talk about, and I hope this has made some sort of sense to people on why I don't think the meta matters. I think it's very individual. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Please leave some comments down below. Let us know what you think. And let's get talking about this because it's an interesting sort of topic, I think. Well, we hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And also, while you're at it, why don't you come join our Discord server? You can chat to me and other members of our fine little community here at Cineful Gaming. You can do so by following the link to our Discord server, which is in the description of the video. Lastly, I'd like to give a shout out to everyone who helps support the channel financially via Patreon and YouTube members. Thank you to our Patreon supporters Christian Weir, James Soren, Chaos Spawn, AJC, Kenny Lowell, Alder and Shot First, James Crowder, Andrew Bowen, Nathan Fee, Tim Newman, and The Rising Ape. And thank you to our YouTube members Green Roots Gaming and Fire Titan. Thank you all for supporting the channel, and if you'd like to help support the channel like these fine people do, you can do so by clicking one of the links down to either our Patreon or our YouTube members in the description of the video as well. Thank you all for watching, everyone, though. Stay safe, stay well, and most of all, keep fighting that war against the grey. Ciao for now.